On this edition of Reporters Roundtable, we are taking a look at the unfortunate air crash that happened in Ahmedabad. It's been more than a week since that air crash happened. Investigation is still in full swing. The wreckage is being studied closely by multiple teams, be it the DGCA, the Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau, or Bureau from the United States of America, the National Transport Safety Agency, as well as from the United Kingdom. But what exactly is the feeling on the ground as far as the families are concerned? There are many who are still waiting for the mortal remains of their loved ones. Joining me to discuss this, Anvit, who tracks civil aviation, Anshul, who was on the ground, getting us the ground reports. Anshul, let me start with you. It's been over a week. You've been at the crash site, you've been at the hospital where the DNA samples were being matched. 1 week later, what is that one thought that stays with you as far as the coverage of this crash is concerned?
Well, definitely the emotions that we saw on the ground of especially of the family members who were actually looking for their loved ones, because it was such a chaotic situation. More than 241 people had died in that aircraft itself, and their family members who were coming over there. Each family had at least 4 to 5 people with them, and all of them were looking for any sort of lead that they could get, which could get them closer to the bodies of their loved ones. But the manner in which this entire management was being done over there, the hospital staff was actually trying to make sure that the situation remains under control. The people who were arriving over there, they were received with sympathy. Empathy is something that the hospital administration and the locals over there also made sure, because we were there, we saw the kind of condition, the kind of weather that was over there, and for family members, for grieving family members to come in that weather and then to look out for their loved ones. And even after that, the manner in which the management was over there, the locals who were supporting them, that somewhere or the other made sure that that the anger of these people or the emotions of these people do not eventually burst out. And that is the reason why we are seeing that even after 7 days, people are still looking for their loved ones, but we haven't seen a lot of people complaining regarding the manner in which this entire process of handing over the bodies is being done. But yes, those emotions, those eyes of those people is something that still haunts. Absolutely, this was one of the probably toughest coverages and the most heartbreaking coverages that I have specifically done in my entire career. And still those eyes, those voices of people, it was so difficult for us as well to actually go ahead and try to interview these people, the family members, because they were absolutely in a state of shock, and in that state trying to get that emotion across the on a television channels to our audiences as well. That was also one of the most difficult tasks, to take those questions from those ailing family members. What is happening with them? What do they hope? Because there was certainly there were a lot of people who did not find the bodies, and they were hoping against hope that eventually somewhere or the other this good news might come, that their loved ones is safe, or they are admitted in some other hospital. But slowly, as the DNA samples are coming out, we are still awaiting for the exact total death toll. But the manner in which these operations are going on, this actually tells you the scale of how drastic was this entire accident.
You know, when you say that there were people who were still looking for their loved ones, one such case we came across was that of Sarla Ben. Sarla Ben was a cook in the hostel mess. She was making chapatis at lunchtime. Her son and her daughter-in-law had just left to deliver the tiffins to a lot of people who could not make it to the mess that particular day. So they decided to leave their 2-year-old daughter, Sarla Ben's grandchild, Adya, sleeping next to her. Next day, next few hours, they were only hunting all around the mess, trying to find some trace of the 2-year-old child or of her grandmother. They went from agency to agency, from Thana to Thana, from one person to the other, not being able to find any trace of these two. And finally, I saw Sarla Ben's husband go to the DNA center to give his sample. Their worst fear, to find their loved ones in the mortuary, but even that could have given them some closure. So cases like these, we were seeing, at least for the 241 people who were on board, their names were on the manifest, their boarding passes were available, so they knew that these people were there. You know, the case of Vijay Rupani, for example, it took a lot of time to figure out, had he boarded, had he not boarded, and finally that closure when the DNA sample of his son matched. That apart, Anvit, you know, this is the human bit of this particular tragedy. But on the other side is also the investigation bit of it. While one part is trying to find out the exact death toll, especially of the neighborhood. 241 people were on board, but how many in the vicinity, how many of the doctors lost their lives, how many of people who were just in the neighborhood lost their life, that is a separate part of the probe. As far as trying to find out how these people died, what really happened in those 36, 38 seconds, what all do we know?
See, I'll pick it up from where Anshul left. Actually, this crash took place, and that impact site diameter would be hardly 500 meters of area. In that area, 300 or close to 300, 280 to 300 people have died, and there's a huge wreckage of a wide body aircraft. So it's very difficult for the investigators to pick out evidence from such a rubble. Also, at the same place where it was huge fire, and because the plane was taking off for Gatwick from Ahmedabad, and the fuel load was heavy, and when it crashed, it went up in a in smoke, and there was fire. That was one reason why also first responders could not attend the site at once. And what is one initial process is that videography and photography of the wreckage site, and then getting onto the impact site soon as possible. So even when they were there, getting to closer to that and getting evidence, most of it is burnt. That was also one challenge, that you have to get evidence out in time before it is damaged. AIB teams had rushed in time. They were first responders also. Their help was also taken. But at the same time, AIB teams have to do terrain mapping as to find out that what were the structures that had hit the plane, and also because what could have been the impact of such structures on the plane, that it went up in fumes, and that there were such a hard big number of casualties that no one on board was found alive, barring one person. So structures that were in the vicinity, how did the plane land on those structures, what was the impact, what was the speed of the aircraft, that all needs to be calculated. Other than that, the spread of wreckage also gives a lot of hint that into what speed the aircraft was in, and how did it impact the buildings that it crashed on, because we see the tail structure is intact, and it's sitting on a tall building. That is a hostel building of doctors. So these impacts certainly give investigators a clue, but mostly it is the data retrieval that will help. It's terabytes of data. Such huge aircrafts have terabytes of data, and the black box has been retrieved. It is being said that it has also sustained some damages because the kind of impact it was. Following that, whether or not it is sent abroad or it is seen inside, analysis is done in India, depending upon that data, because when an aircraft takes off, it transmits a lot of data to ATC.
Yes.
And what data did it transmit, and when that same aircraft had started its journey from Delhi and landed in Ahmedabad, was the data being transmitted to ATC, was it normal? And when it started its journey from Ahmedabad, were there any variations in data? So that will also be a very crucial evidence as far as the investigation in this case.
I just want to take forward from where you left off. When I reached the crash site, which was within a few hours, when I reached there, the first thing I felt was the smell. This was something I had never seen at any of the accident sites that I have covered. And later I realized, when Home Minister addressed the briefing, that smell was 1.25 lakh litre of aviation fuel burning.
Exactly.
You can't imagine the toxicity, the acridness of that smell there. And as you move towards the hostel mess, the smell turned to stench.
Yes.
Because this is where bodies had been, sorry to use the phrase, but literally ripped apart.
Yes.
The plates were still there on the table. Students did not even have a chance to figure out what had happened. Chapatis neatly folded, still lying on their plate. The dal still there in their katori.
Many of the plates had food in it.
Yes,
intact.
the dal was there. The chapati was as neatly folded as if it had just been served. It was only the layer of dust that told you that something had gone amiss. And you must have felt this as well, Anshul, when you moved towards the postmortem room. We did a few pieces together. The stench of death. I mean, I can't imagine what the families must be going through when they were asked to go to the mortuary to identify or to figure out if their loved one's body was there. That stench was unbearable.
Definitely. What kind of trauma are all these families going through? That is something that is absolutely unimaginable. The kind of location at which it had happened, the situation on the ground, the situation inside the hospitals, so many people crowding up. A lot of them came up to us as well to ask for help to find their loved ones. They were, as I mentioned, they were hoping against hope that somewhere or the other they will get the good news. But eventually, as the bodies were being handed over to them, the shock that was on all their faces, the manner in which they were asked to go ahead and identify the bodies, and then from the post-mortem room take those bodies away, or probably what bodies or whatever part of body is left through which the DNAs might have matched. I can't even imagine what kind of trauma are all these people going through, and even after looking at those bodies, just imagine the trauma that these people might have had.
And think of it, I mean, there were children on board. Children, one doctor actually explained this to us. How is it that the DNA sample is being taken from charred bodies? It's from your bone or from your tooth. And molar, the molar here is the best chance that an expert has to extract the right DNA. These children, 18-month-old, 2-year-old, 6-year-old, some of them just have their milk teeth. Their molars are not fully developed. I mean, imagine, I can't even think of what these responders are going through. I came across a lot of doctors who have been working non-stop for 22 hours. They have been brought in from all over Gujarat trying to help them. So that's one part of it. But let's again get back to what really happened. Lot of theories have done the rounds, from the cockpit's error, the flap not opening, engine failure, bird hit. But when you're speaking to people at the Rajiv Gandhi Bhavan here, which is the civil aviation headquarters, are they eliminating any of the possibilities? From 5 or 6, are they now coming down to 2 or perhaps even 3, saying we are now thinking one of these 3 might have happened?
See, because preliminary reports are yet to come out, they are refraining from making any statements, because this is also an international issue. The Dreamliners are being used across globe. However, this is the first crash of Dreamliner since its inception in 2011. So international bodies are also looking in it. ICAO is also supervising. However, if we talk about the how it happened, initially there were experts who were saying that it could be a bird hit. That was eliminated because there were no fumes before the plane crashed. So that one thing they are not in favor of, that it could have happened. But they are saying that because the pilot also, his last message was no thrust, which means that the aircraft did not generate power. The engines could not generate power. Now they are also saying that both engine failing is also a rarest of the rare phenomena, which might not have happened, but in this case it truly comes out as that this is what happened actually. So they are also looking into that, what are the possibilities of two engine failure, which could be because of either fuel contamination or the power loss. Now fuel contamination is an issue which we have previously also seen, but it has not resulted into such fatal crashes. Also power outage, there has to be multiple reasons for it. Flight data recorder is the only thing that will give them exact idea as to what happened, and because flight data it picks up data from the aircraft and shows that whether instruments were performing normally or not. There are weather related instruments, whether those were giving proper signals to the pilots. There are many other instruments that are also transmitting data to ATCs and nearby ATCs also, whichever is the closest ATC. In this case, Ahmedabad ATC would have the most of the data, and when it had flown from Delhi ATC, then Delhi ATC would also have. So what the investigators are looking at, that not only they will speak to the ATC controllers who had dealt with this aircraft when it landed in Ahmedabad and then planned its onward journey. Also, the sole survivor might be crucial to this investigation as to how the plane was behaving, what was happening inside the plane when it crashed actually. So because he's the only survivor, he would be able to tell them that what were the last moment things. Also, cockpit voice recorder is another crucial component of the black box, which will tell them as to what the two pilots were talking. About, and the last 32 seconds when the plane took off. From taking off, what were the pilot's reaction to no thrust, and what did they convey to each other, and then finally when they decided to tell ATC that it's a mayday and it's no thrust, what was happening inside the cockpit? That only the black box which has two components, flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder, only that can tell as to what transpired in those 32 seconds. Also, ground handlers and then ATC will tell them as to whether or this aircraft was behaving normally as per their standards. So that is also crucial as to when it was decided that this airplane will take off from Ahmedabad to Gatwick. Were pre-flight checks done properly? And also now that DGCA has said that the airlines also need to tell, and the airports also need to tell, that the training of technical staff, that also time to time has to be updated.
What I'm also confused about is, if this was all good when it flew from Delhi to Ahmedabad, suddenly what went so wrong on the Ahmedabad Gatwick leg? I think that's also something that they will try and examine.
That is exactly what has left them perplexed as to what happened.
But Anshul, when you landed at the crash site, it was, I think, post midnight that you landed there. I told you what my first impression was, the smell. Tell me what your first impression is, or also touch upon, did you try and get to the survivor? I know there was very heavy security bandobast, but when you tried getting to the survivor, your experience?
So yes, landing on the side, first of all, it was very overwhelming to see the entire situation where the tail of the plane can be seen very clearly, and the aftermath of this entire incident, the buildings that were burned. It was very, very overwhelming at that point to understand as to what has transpired just a few hours ago at this very location. You can, as you rightly mentioned, the students who were present inside the mess, they had no idea. There were students who were present inside those hostel rooms that had to eventually bear the brunt of the blast and the fire that eventually happened. So there were a lot of cases. I met a few responders as well, first responders as well. These were people who had arrived over there before the NDRF had arrived, and others. So the civil defense volunteers that were over there, and they also narrated a very shocking story in what conditions were these bodies being dragged out. Initially, the few bodies that were dragged out, that looked in a good shape, that looked identifiable. But as time went by and they started dragging out bodies from beneath the rubble, it became very, very difficult for those people as well to because these are civil defense volunteers. They are not NDRFs, or they are specifically trained to carry out such missions. But they were present over there dragging out these bodies. Common people dragging out bodies of 3 years old, 4 years old, small body parts, whatever is left. We saw that even 48 hours after the incident, the bodies were still being dragged out.
Completely bloated because of the water that was used to douse the fire, unidentifiable.
That has also probably became an issue. The water, the kind of water that was used or whatever. So there were the initial response, and the people who were giving those initial response, they were also in a state of trauma and absolute shock, because the kind of situation that these bodies were in, no one would have expected to see anything like this in their entire life. No one can even imagine the kind of condition in which these bodies were, and hence it was very, very, very traumatic. And if we speak about the survivor, first of all, it was very shocking to actually know that there is one survivor. In fact, the local police also had no idea that there could be a survivor in this plane crash, and the manner in which the person walked out from the site of incident clearly shows that he was having that high adrenaline rush at that point, and just walking after a few steps he collapsed, and then eventually he was taken in the ambulance. So the adrenaline rush was over there. We tried to get to him, but yes, there was a lot of security, and since we were media people, and we were absolutely asked to stay away at this point.
Why also is because I later asked, we were also all trying to get to Vishwas Ramesh, trying to get his version. He spoke to Doordarshan after the Prime Minister's visit, and even then you could see the impact wounds were still there. And he was not in the right frame of mind. He kept asking for his brother. His brother was seated right next to him. He had actually seen air hostesses collapsing. People sitting on 11B and 11C, he had heard their voices. So even though his seat somehow fell out, and I'm giving you the version of the CISF personnel, these CISF personnel I met, they had just finished their duty at the airport, and they had gone back to their camp. Their camp is just next door, so they have to surrender their pistol before they go on for the rest of the day. When they got the message on their WhatsApp, so whatever state they were in, some had taken off their belts, some had taken off their shoes, they just ran to the spot. And this one CISF responder said that, I saw something and I tried pulling, and the arm came off. So, that was the state where the survivor had also seen for himself. There's another eyewitness, I think you or Yesha, one of you spoke to, who said that for 10 minutes we kept hearing voices, bachao, bachao, and then everything went silent. So this, I think, is one story which is going to stay with us.
Totally.
Even as the investigation is completed and the probe report is submitted.
Totally. And see, I have previously also covered crashes, and there was this BSF plane that had crashed back in 2015, I guess. Luckily, this plane did not catch fire. It went into a pool of water. So we could see the condition of bodies, and it was, I think I haven't forgotten those visuals even till today. It's been more than 9-10 years. In any such crash, the state of bodies are so bad that you have to conduct a DNA. Bodies are decapitated. The speed that the plane has while landing, that incident happened while landing. The plane had taken off, and then it had to make a U-turn because of some technical glitch. And then while landing, it crashed into one of the airport's wall, and it fell into a pool of reservoir. So in that case, because it did not catch fire, so we could experience that what happens to the bodies, that the people that were sitting in the aircraft. Even in this case, it will be very difficult for So generally in these cases, one investigation that is also done is that what was the impact on
Yeah,
bodies.
yeah.
So to find out that in such crashes, so worldwide aviation bodies learn from these crashes as to what seats are most safe and which
Yes.
portion of the aircraft is
Yeah.
most vulnerable.
Right.
In this crash, even that would not be possible because the entire
Everything is
rubble has
charred.
been charred and the
True.
bodies are also burned beyond recognition.
True. I think all of us have a lot more to say because it has been overwhelming. None of us have had a chance to talk. You know, an incident like this, you're so busy covering, going from one scene to the other, you don't get time to process what has happened. So in some sense, for the three of us talking, it's also realizing and letting it sink in what exactly happened in those 7 days that we were there on the ground. And this is exactly the state of mind for perhaps all the other responders. We're just hoping that soon we'll know the final death toll as all the DNA matches are completed, and perhaps in the next month or so we will have some preliminary report from the investigators about what went wrong.